here we are, and one of the things, they asked me how to open this up, and one of the things I thought we'd do, everybody comes from a very different perspective around an HIV cure, and what I'd like to do is start this conversation off with a simple question from your perspective, from your individual, cherished perspective. Where are we right now with an HIV cure? Introduce yourself with your name, where you live, and where you believe we are with an HIV cure. Moses, you're going to go last because you just went first. So we're going to start at the other end. It kind of sucks being you right now.
Well, the first part is easy. I'm Reverend Rob Newells from Oakland, California. I serve as Executive Director of AIDS Project of the East Bay, and along with Jeff, I co-chair the amfAR Cure Cab. I'm also co-chairing the AIDS 2020 Local Planning Group. And where do I think we are with the cure? Yeah, I have no idea. I'm a community advocate, not a researcher. That's your job. But we are too far away from a cure as far as I'm concerned. And I think we are far away from not only the research part of getting a cure, but the community preparation of getting a cure. We're too far away. We're talking about when we'll get a cure when we haven't been talking to the general population. We've been talking about people that we think are at most, that would most benefit from a cure, that are actually thinking about HIV on a regular basis, but we're not talking to the folks that don't think about their HIV on a daily basis. And so I think that's why we're too far away from a cure.
Thanks, Rob. My name is Jeff Taylor. I'm from Palm Springs, California, and I'm with Rob. I'm on the amfAR cab as well as the Care Collaboratory cab at University of North Carolina. And I think it's 1987. Yeah. It really is. We're at very, very early days. There's a glimmer of hope, just like ACT helped a few people for a little while. But we're a long ways away from, you know, a magical cocktail that's going to stop this disease. And we're seeing trials, it's encouraging, that are putting the approaches together. So these cocktails, I call them kitchen sink combinations. They just kind of throw things together in the hope that something will work. But I mean, that's really where we are right now. We've got one unicorn, Timothy Brown, who can prove that it's possible, so he gives us hope. But yeah, it's 1987, and we've got a long ways to go. And as Moses was saying, you know, we need to be, you know, revving up our activism. We need another act up to make sure that we get to that finish line.
I'm legit now, Jeff, thanks. My name is Danielle Campbell, and I am a member of the AIDS Treatment Activist Coalition, and I'm also here with the DARE Collaboratory. I guess sort of continuing in a thread of truth-telling on today's panel, I believe in the science and the directionality of the smartest people on the planet to push us and propel us to a space of cure, but I believe that we are not as far as we need to be in terms of social justice and health equity. I think there are large swaths of folks who are missing from cure conversations, and I would challenge you all to challenge yourself to figure out why that is. Is it something that's historically accidental, or is it something that is intentional? And just sort of corralling some of the prevailing themes of Liz Barr's talk this morning about where cure studies are situated around the globe, most in the US, but when you look at the global epidemic of folks, to sort of bring home what Moses was saying, it's on the continent of Africa. So when we look at the disparities as to where cure studies are happening for a wide variety of scientific, political, and economic reasons, we really need to bring home the concept. Why are certain folks missing from the conversation of cure? And that should guide the science moving forward.
Hello, my name is Itai Jeffries. I come from the Yèsah people. We're the Okanichiban of the Saponi Nation of North Carolina, and I am the Traditional Health Program Director at the Seattle Indian Health Board. Given the state of the epidemic and the crisis among American Indians today, the first Americans, I can say that I also feel that the cure is very far off. You know, American Indian people who are diagnosed today are diagnosed typically in late-stage AIDS. very low survival rates in comparison to the rest of the population, and our women are 3 times more likely than white women in the U.S. to contract HIV. So we know about this, and so when I think from a traditional health perspective in terms of our medicine wheel, we see one aspect of our wellness and our being is physical, and everything I heard today has to do with the research on how to physically cure HIV as well. We have to keep in mind, too, for when we think about non-response to certain populations, which I hear echoed over here, too, that's a weaponized response. That's systemic violence, and where we see racism contributing to these things, I think we have to understand that even if that cure arrived tomorrow in a physical aspect, we have to do work around the social, emotional, the community, and cultural wellness as well. And we don't have to wait for the physical cure to be working on those things, but that won't happen in this type of situation where we have extreme examples of systemic violence and racism. Thank you.
My name is Tranisha Arzah. I'm a defeatHIV CAB member, and I don't really have much to add to all of that. That was all really spot on. But I'll just quickly add that, again, just to iterate what the folks up here said, that yeah, when we're talking about HIV cure, that we are talking about people, right, foremost, and that those are the conversations that I want to be involved in, and that there's a lot that we need to do as community before people participate and are willing to participate in these clinical HIV-related cure research trials.
Hi, I'm Laurie Sylla. I live here in the Seattle area. I am on the defeatHIV Community Advisory Board, and I'm also one of their reps to the Martin Delaney Collaboratory Community Advisory Board. And I think we're in a really tricky place with cure in a number of ways. I know when I came home from the first community meeting where they had Timothy and defeatHIV scientists were talking about how they wanted to try to modify and replicate what happened, I was so excited I couldn't shut up for days. I would tell anybody who was listening to me about how exciting this was. And as I've gotten more involved, the complexity of all of this, has become much more clear. And I hope that Carl was right today when he talked about this new assay that might actually be able to measure something meaningful about the reservoir, because if you don't know what you're measuring, it's really hard. Before we had a biomarker like viral load to talk about progression of HIV, it was really hard to know stuff, and we don't have that kind of a biomarker at this point for knowing how we're doing around cure. And I think we're also in a tricky place because depending on where you live, if you live in a place that has access to 1 pill a day treatment that has minimal side effects and high efficacy and low barriers to becoming resistant, and you have a guaranteed supply and a way to have your meds paid for, to ask people that are in that situation where you can take a pill a day that's no more difficult, not much more difficult than a vitamin, and be healthy, how do we ask people to submit to some of the risks involved in some of the things that we're doing around HIV treatment, on the one hand? On the other hand, we know that that is not universally available, and we need to shift something to make something more accessible and more feasible to people over the long run. And a cure would do so much around that, and we know a cure would do something around stigma. So there's a lot of hope involved. And I think we have no way of knowing when the next breakthrough is coming. So in the beginning, we couldn't have imagined AZT, and then we couldn't have imagined, combo art, and now we're talking about long-acting injectables. And so the fact that we can't see it today doesn't necessarily mean that we're far away. And so I think we need to have, committed resources and vision and the sharing of information and really bringing the brightest minds together. And I think that there are a lot of attempts to do that, which really make a difference in where we are with cure. And there was something else I wanted to say and I forgot. So if I think of it, I will share that later. But I think we are in it. Oh, I know what it was. I think it is really important that we be inclusive and look at who is involved in the conversation, who's being included in trials, who is conducting trials? I think if we look at the demographics of the people who are conducting trials, they're not going to be very reflective of who we need to have in the trials. And we have to balance that with people not wanting to be guinea pigs. So yes, we want to be inclusive, and we also want people to have the right to say, well, no, I don't want to be the first human in which you do that. So I think there's some trickiness and some finessing, and we really have to be in dialogue and listening to each other around different perspectives around, you know, where we can go and what the directions are and the best ways to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses Supercharger. Like I said, I have so much hope in the cure. We just need to keep our heads high, just to keep doing what we do. But I really believe in empowering our community. We need to move with our community together. Just imagine if you get the cure tomorrow, you'll have a problem with Africa, like you are having right now with art. The major reasons why we're having art challenges in Africa is because we were not involved in the art at the beginning, at the very beginning, when it was being discovered. Africa, the community was not involved. They just brought it later on. So that's why there are so many adherence challenges, accessibility, every acceptability, everything. So my urge is that with the cure, I need to start involving community right now by breaking down the hard science of cure. We need to start breaking down the hard science so that they can understand what we are talking about. When you talk about gene therapy, reservoir, how can you break it down into a simple language understood by an ordinary person in Africa? I mean, that's what we need to start with when you talk about the cure. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you. I want to thank you all for opening comments, but I want to kind of take us a little bit left and bring us back a little bit right? Because I want to take us to U equals U, right? I want to talk about the role that U equals U plays in a cure. I think we started talking about it a little bit earlier, but then we got off of it. And I think that there is a place where kind of the U equals U, and I want to call it a movement. I want to call it the U equals U movement and its relationship to the HIV cure science, HIV cure research, where those two cross the plane, where is U equals U a intervention versus where is U equal U cure related, where is it not, how are they related, how do they overlap, how do you see them, how are they the same and how are they different? How are they community engagement activities and how is it science? And talk to me about U equals U versus cure research and community.
You know, I think the U equals U contributes in some ways to hesitancy around participation in some trials, because I think what's happening is we're doing a better job of getting that message out. Stay on your meds, be durably suppressed, and then you won't transmit the virus to anybody, and that is a really important message to give people. So then if you start talking to people about trials with treatment interruptions, people are saying, well, wait a minute. You know, my doctor told me I have to take my meds all the time. And people have gotten that message and internalized that message. And it's good that they have. And it's important not only for U equals U, but for maintaining your health. And then we're saying, and here's a study, and you might go off your meds. And if you do, you might become an undetectable. And we don't know when and if you're going to become undetectable. But it's like, I mean, you know, detectable again, not undetectable. And, you know, I think what we really need are, you know, home testing kits so that I could monitor myself at home every day and say, oh, do I have viral rebound if I'm on a treatment interruption? And then I don't have to be burdened and go to a clinic. And then I could have more knowledge and more power. Am I still undetectable. So I think we need to think about what kind of technology can there be in place so people can continue to know they're undetectable. And then I think we need to have informed consents and conversations with people that are in trials about the fact that they may become infectious again if they're in a study that includes a treatment interruption. Now, if you don't have a treatment interruption, then likely you would still remain undetectable. So it becomes, I think, less of an issue in trials that don't include treatment interruption. So I think there's definitely impact.
Personally, I think the relationship between U equals U is, when you look at all the studies, the cure research studies, they're all targeting somebody who is undetectable. They're all looking at somebody who will be treated, undetectable, then given a cure intervention. So the relationship is that you will have to be undetectable. You need to be undetectable. This program, we have started receiving it in Africa, the U equal U. It's really very important. The science is correct, is right. But the challenge we have in Africa, we are receiving it in pieces. People are not getting the right information. The information that is on the ground is that the minute you are on ARVs, you don't pass the virus. But the science is you must be on treatment, take it correctly, be undetectable. You must be undetectable. So I think that is the relationship between cure and U equals U, is being undetectable.
So I bring a whole lot of my cousins to this work with me, and I have a whole lot of cousins that have lots of different opinions, but a group of my cousins honestly believes that there's already a cure, right?
Come through, Rob.
And if there's already a cure, then you're just trying to get this you're trying to keep me on meds to get money. It's all about it's follow the money, right? I have a set of cousins that really believes there's a cure, and HIV medications are for profit only. And then I have some other cousins that find themselves a little more savvy, and they say, y'all been telling me we've already got the tools to end the epidemic in this country. We've got PrEP and we've got treatment as prevention. We don't need anything else. Why are you still experimenting on folks, right? Because there's medical mistrust, which is real, which we gloss over quite a bit and never really address. And we wonder why black folks aren't in our studies because we have not addressed the medical mistrust. And so U equals U in relation to cure research is, why should I be in a study if we've got what we need?
Danielle?
Yeah, I was gonna try and come on out there, but I think Rob sort of hit the overarching theme of what I wanted to cover. But I think, U equals U is a great, great public health message, and I don't think it's being marketed as such. Like, the HIV folks have owned that message, and we've not disseminated it to other public health communities that can benefit from the advocacy arm of how effective it's been at reaching the world and shifting the paradigm when we talk about sex positivity and disease transmission, right? But I think just as a woman who does work where the rubber meets the road, there's this lack of translatability when you look at African American or black folks, when you look at women, when you look at the treatment cascades and you go down the 90-90-90, black folks are more likely to be diagnosed, less likely to be virally suppressed, less likely to be in situations socio-economically where they are contending with their HIV diagnosis on a day-to-day basis. So U equals U is great, but in certain populations, you'll miss the boat each time because they have so many other social factors that get them to a place of acceptance before you talk about them being virally suppressed. And the message isn't that there's almost zero risk of transmitting HIV to your partner. The message should be that for how long you need to be virally suppressed, right? Because if you're already talking to folks who aren't virally suppressed, then the message gets skewed. Well, I'm just going to get undetectable and then I can't pass it to my partner. So we still have a work to do around the dissemination messaging of U equals U in this, fantabulous public health messaging campaign. So I believe in it, but again, I think just as someone who is representative of a racial ethnic demographic that is often missed and overrepresented in this epidemic, remember that.
Hello again. One thing that I think of is that U equals U is not even reaching American Indian communities. In fact, we're still trying to raise awareness that people need to get tested. And if you think about Indian Health Service, it's funded at about 50% of need, and so there's barriers there. And then the historical barriers to even accessing care, comfort of going to seek a medical professional. When we think about the era of eugenics for American Indians, it ended very recently, and so there's still a lot of distrust of medical establishments. So I think the mountain is really steep for getting that information out there. So whether or not this is, you know, that conversation of U equals U and cure, we're not even having that conversation, and we're not at that table.
So I guess it's one of the things, you know, I serve on the Believe cab, and that's one of those things I've done HIV vaccine cab work, and I've been involved in HIV vaccine work, HIV cure research, and, we don't see a lot of people of color researchers and scientists in this work. I think we look at who are the participants in HIV cure research. It's a low N in most of the studies as it is. And they are older. And I think that there is some level of altruism there. I think it's older white guys are willing to take this risk. And I mean, why is that? Why is it that older white guys are like, okay, why is it? I mean, why do you think older white, I'm looking at you, Jeff. I was going to say. I've known you long enough where I feel like I can look at you and say, hey, old white guy, why are y'all doing this? Y'all all in Palm Springs going, okay, why not?
All white guys never die, they just moved to Palm Springs. But, so I think part of it is historical. The disease was first recognized in the gay community. And not just the white, overwhelmingly white, but we need to acknowledge that, anybody can be gay. But I think historically, they were the ones, and it was a result, I think, of the political climate at the time. That's when the gay community was first finding its political voice, and suddenly AIDS hit it, and hit it hard. And that's why people turned that political activity towards AIDS. So I think it's a real historical coincidence.
But
so I don't think there's anything... Sure.
Okay. I'm asking HIV cure specifically, right? Because I think there's an anomaly I really see in HIV cure. I mean, it's really white and it's really male.
Yeah. So there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, the reason I was kind of going back into the history is because they got involved in research. They're really invested in research. That's why we're alive. I think in the gay community, people recognize that. So that's where that altruism that you're talking about comes from that older generation. You talk to the younger millennials, and they're like, maybe I don't want to do this. I've got a life to lead and, a job and bills to pay. So I think that's historically why we got there. But in terms, a lot of it is just all the social and economic injustices that we live with in this country, right? That, sadly, white people hold most of the power, the education, have access to the funding, and that's how it gets there. And it translates into, the people doing the research are going to be most, I should turn that around. People looking to participate in research are going to be most comfortable doing that research with people who look and feel like, talk like them. So I think, and that's true in any community, right? So I think that's why that's happened, and it's not a good thing. And some of us have been beating the drum for years saying we have underrepresented populations. This is not a gay white male epidemic anymore. It's completely shifted. We've been trying for decades to get more women involved, more people of color involved in studies. And there's all these structural obstacles to that in terms of having clinics in the right place, having clinics in the communities where people need them, having providers who are of that community so they can build that trust, the medical mistrust that Rob was referring to, and just making it physically easier so people have jobs, can go on weekends and evenings, and it just, because there's limited money, it's always a deciding factor, nobody wants to put in the extra time and money to make that happen. And until we stand up and say you have to, it's not going to happen.
We have like 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure people can...
Let me just add for that. I think we don't see more, particularly gay black men, participating in cure studies, because most of the studies are in the United States, and I think, if most of the studies are in Africa, you see more black men in studies, right? But The altruism isn't as strong, I think, because we don't see the epidemic like white gay men saw it in the 80s, and we don't see, we're not as connected to our brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa. I think if we were as connected to our African roots, then there would be more altruism in African American men and women to participate in studies.
Yeah, some questions right here. Did you both have questions?
Well, I have a comment. I mean, I think, you know, what I see every day, and I work at San Francisco General Hospital, and I see, you know, people coming in for, I work on the research floor, and I see things. I mean, I think some of it is that the researchers pick the lowest hanging fruit.
Yes.
They make assumptions about people, they make assumptions about their ability to show up, which sometimes is true. I mean, you know, they have a history of especially gay white men, at least in San Francisco, who participated in trials from day one. There's just a lot of things that go on that don't really have anything to do with really asking the person to join the trial per se. It's more like, oh, you're a good candidate, you know, you'll show up, you know, you can understand what we're doing, you can ask questions, you'll take your medication. I mean, it's just a whole lot of that going on. That, you know, I think people are aware of that, but it's so ingrained in the research culture that it's really hard to break that.
And it's like, where is the research going on? Because like San Francisco's 3% black now. So where are you recruiting your folks?
What do you expect to see enrolled in your trials if there's 3% of us vote? You know, we're 67% represented amongst women, and how many in black men? 54. Right. But you're recruiting from a place where there's 3% of us represented. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a moderator's liberty and ask my my brother from another mother to lead it with the last question. Cornelius, since you're
Dr. Baker.
Dr. Baker's here. What's going on with the HIV cure, both domestically and globally, since you're all over the world?
Well, no, I mean, but see, I think this is a really good question and a good point. But first, I want to go back to this last one.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm Cornelius Baker from Washington, D.C. But first, I want to just go back to this question about the participation of communities, particularly black gay men. And I want to just really remind us that it was just, 9 years ago, that the HIV Prevention Trials Network did its first study looking at HIV in black gay men. And I want to remind us that that study, HPTN 061, was a feasibility study. Because what the researchers said was that they didn't know whether black gay men would even participate in research. That trial showed that black gay men would participate in research. It was fully enrolled. The carryover was 073, looking at whether black gay men would utilize PrEP. That study showed that black gay men not only would utilize PrEP, but it had a 93% retention rate. There is currently no study in any of the networks or CFARs looking specifically at gay black men. So before speaking about whether they will participate in any form of research, maybe we should hold the investigators accountable for looking at where 1/4 of the epidemic is in the United States. So, but then once you move on from that, I think that the question you just asked is a really important question, because you asked me, where is the cure research? I have no idea. And I mean, and I think that, and not to be arrogant, but for all of our communities, we've got to figure out a way to get this easier to our communities. And to the 1.2 million people living with HIV in the United States, but also the other 35 billion around the world. But if in the United States, with all of our media channels and all of our organizations, we haven't figured out a way to inspire ourselves to be interested in a cure, I think we have a problem. And I think that and that's why I actually came here today. I mean, this morning, and I had other stuff, but I wanted to know for myself, Like, how do we do this better? And I think that this is a really important question. And I just want to just thank people for putting this together, because it's been enormously helpful to me, but I think it reflects the work that we have ahead.
So, any last minute comments? Because I have to wrap up before Michael kicks me again. No? I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our panelists. I love you all. I know you may not always feel that love come from me, but I do love you all. Thank you very much.